Okay, I think we're all done. So shall we start right now? So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us online in this session. My name is Maria Glinskaya, and I will be hosting today's roundtable session as part of Architectural Informatics Society Kyoto Week 2026. Today's session is titled Utopia or Future: Can Agentic AI make architectural voice a requirement, not a privilege? Unfortunately, we won't be able to take live questions from the audience today, but I hope to at least provide an interesting content for you all to listen to. So first, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And once again, thank everyone for joining the discussion. I'm genuinely glad we managed to gather here across 3 time zones. Let me introduce our panel. First, we have Keisuke Toyoda, architect, project professor at the University of Tokyo, and co-founder of the computational design practice Noise. His current research group, the Common Ground, explores special platforms for interaction between humans and AI agents in architectural environments. Also, we have Toshiki Hirana, architectural designer and project associate professor at the University of Tokyo, has been leading design studios in both Japan and US, exploring how generative AI can stimulate creativity and reshape the design process itself. Also, we have Marko Mihic, assistant professor at Moscow Architectural University and the founder of BuildBuild, Luxembourg-based AI automation platform tailored for construction and real estate, bringing the most directly operational large-scale business perspective to our conversation today. And finally, Sofya Dobychina, architect and independent researcher, associate partner at ContextMachine, a Russian startup working at the intersection of computational design and AI. And me, myself, Maria Glinskaya, doctoral student at the University of Tokyo Institute of Industrial Science, where I personally developed the virtual urbanism project. And today I'll be moderating this discussion. So I'll start with the context, but I'll keep this short as it's much more interesting, I think, to hear from the people in this room than to watch me talk at slides. So I'll just present a quick sketch of the context of today's conversation. Since the beginning of 2026, the Agentic AI wave has reached something like a cultural boiling point. Anthropic shipped Claude Cowork, so basically now your grandma can run agents on her desktop. Some independent developer built a new global internet sensation, OpenClaw, and it started basically as a side project, but furthermore now it spawns Moldbook, described as social network for AI agents. So now vibe coding went from niche developer joke into a new obsession. Everyone is building an agent, everyone has a framework, everyone has a pitch deck. This is Gartner's hype cycle for AI from June 2025, and AI agents, as we see here, is at the absolute peak. But at the same time, same Gartner notes that over 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled just by 2027. So we are in this fascinating and slightly absurd moment where the hype is at maximum, but the investment is very real, and actual picture where it actually lands is genuinely unclear. And here are the Anthropic schemes that probably everyone here has already seen, but I'll share them nevertheless. Architecture is not exempt from any of these. Anthropic's own labor market study published just this year puts architecture and engineering at 72% theoretically automatable, which is literally the 4th place. And the second graph here is even more interesting. It shows the gap between what AI could theoretically cover and what is actually already being used in practice. The blue shape is basically our future, and the red shape is where we are right now. So we're at the beginning at the huge curve. But the angle that I want to discuss today is a slightly unconventional one. Most conversations about AI and architecture go one of two ways. Everyone is losing their job or everything getting magically better. But we are not doing either of those today. Instead, I want to approach architecture at what it actually is, a form of cultural production, and suggest a different perspective. What if AI, rather than accelerating the mass production of architectural mediocrity, which given the most AI-generated content has earned the name of AI slope, might seem like the obvious direction. But what if AI could actually trigger the opposite and make distinctive authored architecture not a luxury, but a new requirement. Let me explain my point a little here. So historically, architectural voice has always been a privilege. Every canonical example of genuine architectural voice traces back to the same condition: total client trust or no client at all. Villa Savoy, Falling Water, Glass House, Bruder Klaus Chapel, all these examples are basically either backed by patron freedom or personal wealth. Now, when it comes to real practice, the reality of most architectural practice, and I think everyone in this room has faced this at some point of their life, is the opposite. The client doesn't want your voice. They want the thing they saved on Pinterest. They want what they already signal status in their social circle. So either glass facades, marble lobbies, whatever Zaha did 15 years ago. Architectural practice for the most firms, most of the time, is sophisticated imitation on demand. But what if AI could change this dynamic? AI abundance is already making human authorship more valuable, not less. This shift became visible almost immediately across creative industries. The moment everything could be generated, the handmade became the new premium. But how does this apply to architecture? If agentic pipelines can absorb the operational backbone of the practice, which is code compliance, constraint checking, site analysis, budget optimization, and permit coordination, then imitation-oriented production becomes the new default. Now the architect who delivers the Pinterest thing faces competition from a machine that does it faster and cheaper. Then what signal status, what client will pay a premium for, becomes something machine structurally cannot provide, a distinctive, genuine, architectural, authentic voice. So this is basically the bet that I'm placing on the table today. Could agentic AI make author-centric architecture a demand rather than a luxury? Could clients, not just patrons, but like ordinary clients, end up paying a premium for genuine architectural voice, the way they already pay a premium for the handmade products? Or is that just wishful thinking? And on that note, let's find out and finally switch from my talking to our panelists. I'd like to suggest structuring our conversation today around 3 themes, basically, starting with AI authorship and the agency, then going on with AI and creativity, and finally AI and real practice. And I have some questions prepared furthermore if we need them. But for now, I want to start with the first, authorship, because before we ask whether AI can liberate architectural voice, we need to answer a more basic question first. What does authorship even mean when AI is involved? And I think a great starting point here is Sonia's recent book, Culture of Instances, which is part of Auditoria research program led by Yuri Grigoryan in Moscow. It looks at exactly this question: what is the role of the architect and the building in our post-digital content? And I was really glad to have a chance to share this with the Japanese audience through today's event. So Sonia, I'd love to give you a floor here.
First, thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion and to talk about the research. The central theme of the culture of instances operates between 2 connected points. First, how authorship has changed itself and how our understanding of the building itself has evolved in a post-digital world. So first, about the building, it is no longer a fixed monument expressing a single cultural moment, but buildings, and now buildings are never truly stable. So they function may change over time, they may be partially renovated, as well as their design is adjusted by multiple architects. So the building may be changing, redesigned by multiple authors, so it isn't like something static and stable nowadays. So now I think a building may be better understood as a generative system that continuously adapts to shifting contexts. And second, architectural authorship also has already fundamentally changed. Today, the resulting architecture is shaped by many actors. First, the developer who sets constraints, engineers, marketing, and the changing urban context itself, and changing requirements for architecture existing in the social context. And therefore, the architect is no longer a single offer of a fixed object, and authorship has also now been distributed. And what the research proposes is not to resist this, but to think more clearly about what it means and to ask what the architect's specific contribution within the system should be. And according to the research, an architect becomes a mediator, someone responsible not only for the image of the building, but for designing its relationships with culture, communities, and shifting uses over time. And in my research, this idea draws on Kelly Easterling, specifically in her talk in Architecting After Politics series. She states that there is no point in designing a building if you cannot also design the path by which its idea is understood, discussed, and absorbed in the culture. And therefore, architecture now becomes responsible for shaping the space in which cultural change is perceived, as well as for embedding it within the living system of the world. And also to understand why it is interesting, I suggested to look at Jacques Rancière's understanding of aesthetics. It's his dialogue with Mark Foster Gage, Aesthetics After Politics, where he states that aesthetics is not really about beauty or style. It's about the shared experience of the world and about who gets to participate in it. In that sense, aesthetics, according to him, becomes a political act. And when architecture shapes the spaces where people live, meet, and form their understanding of the world, it's already operating in this dimension. So in this context, the new role of the architect, as the research proposes, is to start working consciously at this level. And authorship becomes now a participation in a collective field of meaning, one that is always open, always evolving, and is always shared. So, and in terms of this conversation, I think AI is already bringing a dramatic change in the common pipelines of work. So this is, I think, a perfect time. There could not be a better time for this discussion.
Definitely. So I totally agree with your position. And I think my personal thinking is very close to this research. So I was very glad to bring you here in this conversation today. So I would like to give the word further on to everyone here to hear the positions first on the statement of authorship, agency, and AI and architecture right now. And first, whoever wants to jump in, or maybe I'd like to start with Keisuke, because also your pavilion in Expo 2025 in Osaka was described basically as architectural operating system. Building visitors could literally like reinterpret and edit. So maybe you can say your position at this.
Thanks for the presentation, both of you, and then the exciting the theme to discuss. It is a very fundamental and broad question, so I'm not really sure how I can kind of jump in. But if you are asking me that our pavilion for Osaka Expo, which is built and just demolished recently, we designed this the thematic pavilion, which is based on the voxel, which is the the typical digital format for the description, and we made it like the Minecraft, and we physically made it like with the membrane of the Miller surface, so that the building is physical building, but the soft. And we install the robotic arm and hoover, and then it moves various form. We consciously make it like an architecture as an agent. That's the one of the hidden theme, other than just the context of the exhibition. So in the sense that me as a practicing architect and also the researching professor in the University of Tokyo, my common theme, the interest is how the architecture building could be start having an agency, not the opposite, like opposing like element against the human as an agent. the AI or any other robotic agency is coming into our daily life. And then those are acting as a non-human agent. And still, the architecture or city is still considered as an environment. But nowadays, that the architecture is becoming an agent, but the agent is a little bit different from a human being, because a human being has the solid one body, but architecture could be dismantled into the pieces. It could be divided into the portion, and how you can make the continuity, or which form one agency and which form the other agency. How are you going to divide into two or multiple, and which is the indispensable component? So dispersion and how the amalgam form the one unity of the agency might be a good question. So architecture could be a one solid unit, but once you extend it to the urban condition, and then there's a bunch of layers of the units, and each layer then compound form the potential agency. So it's not any question, but just explore some kind of landscape potentially based on this conversation. In that sense, Maria-san's doctoral research is very interesting, because she captured thousands of pictures. Those are each element, but each element cannot form the agency, but you form the kind of the neighborhoodness, the kind of identity of each neighborhood. That could be potentially a static agency. And then when you can form, and then you can say the agency is born once you reach certain complexity. And so just as all.
Thank you very much for your comment. Really appreciate it. So would anyone else want to say anything on this particular topic of authorship, agency, and the kind of role of architect and the building in this context next? Toshiki or Marko, would you wish to say something?
Well, let's see. Okay, maybe I'll jump in. All right. So, I think, yes, this issue of authorship and creativity, I think it's quite interesting. And what Sofya brought up about this shared authorship, I think that's quite relevant. And I cannot really agree more that we are shifting into the era where the authorship is not dominated by architects themselves, but shared among different shareholders or stakeholders or different agents. And I'm not quite sure whether I should share the screen right now, because what I've been thinking about recently, working on this specific project I'm working on, is exactly about how exactly we can achieve this idea of sharing authorship and where the creativity lies. So, well, of course, I mean, Maria, you're familiar with this thing, but what I've been working on, right, for almost 4 years now, is to utilize the AI. I mean, specifically speaking, image generating AI in the design processes. And here, in my design studio at the University of Tokyo, we have been looking at this mental therapy called Hakoniwa therapy, or in other words, a sand play therapy, which is about creating this kind of microcosmos within the given box, putting random objects, toys, and creating this kind of topography, creating this microcosmos. And this is a way to materialize subjects unconsciousness. And I think the creativity really lies in our own unconsciousness. So how to like really extract, materialize those unconsciousness and materialize into architecture is something like I've been looking at. And I thought like this is something like which we can really utilize AI to like really materialize our unconsciousness. So I'm not quite sure whether I should like show this, but Maria was actually like one of my first like students in this design studio. And in her case, like she worked with like this, well, back then like it was so like state of art, but right now it's like so kind of classical, outdated AI model, Stable Diffusion 1 version 1
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
And
it was
it
version 1 and 1.5, so it's like
yeah, and did iteration
retro.
of image generation in to like kind of really go deep into like her unconsciousness or obsession, in other words, and materialize as a form of hakoniwa, or like as a form of like this microcosmos constructed within this given box, and develop that into the final project, which deals with like 3D scanning and another kind of AI processing. So I think like this is something I've been looking at in terms of exploring where our creativity lies. And what is like really interesting about this idea of going deep under into person's unconsciousness is that it really echoes with what surrealism used to like work on. So in their case, they utilize this experiment called like automatic drawing or automatic writing, which people can just freely like draw or write sentences to kind of go deep into their unconsciousness. And there's this kind of idea that as you go deeper down into your unconsciousness, there's something like which can be shared among people. So it's not like your personal thing, the unconsciousness is, but it's something like which we can share it among others, or maybe like we can say that there's some kind of collective unconsciousness of the era. And maybe if we can like utilize that in the design process, then maybe like we can really achieve this idea of shared authorship. And I mean, like right now I'm working on the exhibition based on this idea upcoming, and like which deals with this like again like sand play or hakoniwa therapy. And we have this this like hakoniwa where visitors can like really engage, interact with, and the hakoniwa, the condition of the box is constantly being scanned and processed in the AI and turned into like a kind of urban scale project, constantly feeding back. So, I mean, like, this is like an ongoing project, and my mind is like really disorganized and scattered around. But what like Sofya brought up was like really really interesting, and something like which really echoes to what I've been doing. So, just sharing this. But anyways.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think it's kind of a good sign that even though we are so desperate around the world, like dispirited, everyone is kind of thinking about the same thing, just in different ways, but we are still echoing same ideas. And it's probably a good sign that we are moving somewhere in a same direction, not just randomly, even though everything seems to be quite disruptive and strange in this direction, where everything is changing constantly with AI progressing, with technology progressing, but still the ideas, the like core ideas, are something that we could relate to from different sides of the perspective. Yeah, so I wanted to give the floor to Marko next, I guess, because I'd also want to speak from a more practical side, not just the side of dreamers, but from the side of actual builders and construction. And I wanted to give you the floor to tell about what you've been doing and how this all seems from the point of construction and actual business.
Thank you. I think I'll try to start with like putting some like framework around this AI type thing, and maybe then moving to what we are doing and telling on our experience how it works. So basically, what is AI? Yeah, it's some new technology which we still haven't discovered how to use. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of hype that it's going to do a lot of works that we're doing now. But like we already had those things before in the history, like electricity. Have we become like jobless after electricity? I guess no. There is much more goods produced, much higher standard of living has brought to the planet, etc., etc., etc. Basically, like 70 years ago, to say someone that you had a hot shower in the morning or in the evening, it was super luxury. Basically, now that's a common thing. Like, imagine you don't have a hot water in the morning. I guess that's a disaster, not a normal situation. So I'm quite positive about changes. Why I'm quite positive about changes is when you look not about when you think about any domain, any business, anything that's producing anything, there's a huge chunk of work which is not the creative work, not interesting work. For example, Notion, in their last presentation, they call it busy work. So they found a new term for like creative work and busy work. And busy work is something that none of us do like to do. And to live in modern society, we need to fill a lot of forms, do a lot of paperwork, do a lot of calculations, and blah, 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 blah. So there is a lot of busy work that we will love to disappear. But let's think about it like through the eyes of the architect. So let's go back like 100 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Frank Lloyd Wright, how his studio looked. There is one master and like 50 to 100 people doing drawings. So one creative person and then a lot of people doing, of course, some creative work, but mainly technical work. Then like what we have like 5, 10, 15 years ago, we came to the modern way of architectural studio when you usually have like 2 to 5 partners, creative partners who collaborate and can do more. Like 1 + 1 is more than 2. Yeah, if we're talking about creativity and how mind can go. But then you don't need any more like 50 to 100 people doing technical drawings. You can have like 10 people or 15 people. So all of a sudden, architecture studios become like mainly around 20 people, 20 to 30 people. We're not talking about the huge ones, but the huge ones, they're just multiplicating those like small teams, yeah, which can produce everything. And but still, like there are like few partners, which we all of the architects wish to become one day, and a lot of people doing a lot of busy work, changing models, like how many designs are still done like in parallel in drawings, in 3D, and then in some presentations. So there's a lot of redoing same work, etc., etc. So my bet that basically AI is like, if we're just thinking about the future and being like dreamers, it's just gonna remove all of that not interesting work, yeah. And a creative person will be able, maybe by himself, to do everything much faster, or maybe more people will be able to collaborate on one project. But in any case, it's gonna come to bring us to the point where more buildings in the world can be done with architects. It means there will be more authorship, because like, there is no right number, but they said that like not more than 10% of the building worldwide is done with the architect involved. So hopefully making the architectural services much cheaper, much faster, we can do not 10%, but maybe 40%, maybe 100%. So there will be much more work for architects actually to do. But then comes the next layer. No, we're not going to the next layer. Let's stay with architecture engineering. This chart from Anthropic, when I saw it, I was laughing like LOL, like lots of love. Why? Because like if you see, they're putting like architecture number 4 with engineering, and then current state like less than 1% because there is no basically any improvements there recorded, besides like visualizations. And then the question is like, I was last year on this big meetup of people who are directly involved in AI, one of the biggest European companies involved in AI, and what they're saying unanimously, like AI is good in doing things when there are huge data sets. The biggest data set around, text. That's why AI is writing text amazingly. Second biggest data set that we have is code. So basically the second domain that's gonna be fully, dominated by AI is coding. And now let's think about this. Who are the most paid people in last 10 years? Developers, the IT developers, I mean coders. And they're highly educated, they have high salaries, etc. And what are the biggest companies in the world, like top 10 companies? I think 7 or 8 of them are IT companies. So like biggest part of their spendings is spendings on the developers writing code. It was 10 years ago like that, 5 years ago, 3 years ago like that. So all of a sudden we have a tech that's gonna completely change coding, and it's already doing that. And what we're having, less code is written by the programmers, and programmers are basically becoming architects. They're making the frameworks, ideas, and orchestrating those agents. So then where the hype comes from? The biggest companies, which have like the biggest PR, the biggest voice, their economy is going to be affected the most, and their domain is going to be affected the most. Of course, it's the hype, and they're afraid of losing jobs. Let's go back to architecture. Is there any data set of drawings or 3D models that AI can analyze? No. There's no standard way of like drawing in both CAD or BIM. So basically AI still doesn't have a data set to become an architect actually. So I think that we're gonna go like from top to the bottom. And for example, like the best cases like healthcare, there's a lot of data, and data sets are great, has been collecting like for tens of years. So I hope there will be a lot of progress in healthcare. But in architecture and design and engineering, it's still a mess. So we should more talk about like open standards and standardization about like between in the profession to bring it to the point that it's possible. But yeah, I'm sorry for this long speech, but I want to come to the last point. I'm the one who I'm an architect. Yeah, I'm teaching some students to do architecture, but I am not directly involved in architecture myself now. Why? Because when I understood that basically architects, we are not the designers of the design. The product is the building, for example, or the urban design or something already built in a city or in a village, something physical, something big. And if you think about all of the spendings needed to be done to have this building there, architecture services are like few percentage of that. So like the biggest part is materials, labor cost, and then management of all of that. And architecture is just the premium on top. So if we're talking about radical improvements, we should not like optimize something that's 2%. Even by 100%, we're not gonna feel it. Yeah, if we want to improve something, we need to focus on the big parts. For example, like like SpaceX with their rockets, they understood that on a P&L, the biggest part is the spaceship itself. So the idea is to bring it back. So basically, here the same. If we look on the life cycle of from the idea to the design to the real estate development, construction, etc., there will be plenty of work that all of us, every single person in the chain, would love to delegate to AI and to forget about it. Because building a building is something super complex. It involves and all of those changes, like design, then materials are not available, we need to do the redesign, etc. It's a super complex management job and communication job. So there is a plenty of ways how AI can help our industry go super agentic, bringing more power to the authors, either architects, engineers, real estate developers, everyone involved in it, and make much more efficient collaboration in the process. So basically, when I'm thinking about architecture engineering that having like this big potential, I'm not thinking about the most precious part of it, which is authorship, analysis, the research, the design, the ideas. I'm thinking about all like hundreds of hours that we need to do after that one small idea we had, or like a great brainstorm we had with our partners. So if we look about like creative space, architecture is maybe the hardest one to come from idea to the result. It can take like 5 to 7 years. It can take like thousands and thousands of hours of super highly educated people just to come to the point that construction is started. So in my opinion, it's just gonna make our profession a little bit less easier. Like giving synthesizers to the musicians didn't like remove the bands or like made so much music that everyone is playing his own music. No, we still have great musicians. We have great musicians, more than ever great musicians like in history. So I think that this is something that's gonna remove the clutter from our profession, and maybe like the age of like succeeding architects will become not 50, 60 years old, but maybe 35, 40 years old because of that. So maybe we speed up there. So I'm super optimistic on that. And I think that Toshiki showed this like amazing model, which is becoming the project, like as understood live via AI. So much ideas can be found using that. Just imagine before, like you have idea how building should look, and then you need like 2 weeks to have renderings from 2 spots just to see like, is it gonna look like as good as you think? And now this is like becoming almost the real time. It's not yet there. It's not gonna be in a year or two, but we will be able to. And to conclude this part, I like to point out to the iPhone. The team that's designing the camera from the phone using Sony metrics. So there is a separate team doing the matrices, yeah, for the camera, but just the team that's designing the component of the camera inside this phone is more than 300 people. And by the history, when we have more efficient way to do something, we're usually not going to do like with the smaller teams, more simpler things. With the smaller teams, more simple things. No, it's bringing more complexity usually. So we just open the door to make much more complex things. We can do much more like studies on our designs. Are they good for environment? Are they good for health? Are they good for society? So basically, maybe we'll be in a position that we'll have like 75 architects designing one apartment effectively, fast, and producing the best apartments in the world, which like today's apartments are going to look like something hike totally. So I think this is the future, and we should definitely not be scary of it. We just need to try to bring it to become our tool as usual. And yeah, that's my view on that.
Thank you very much for the speech. As always, very interesting to listen to you, and absolutely glad to your presence in our conversation today. Well, how do we turn this to the next? Like, I think the only issue that I feel like I totally agree with most of the points that you made, that it's actually, I'm also very positive with the change and with the AI changing our practice to be actually having more potential than less, and with people being able to be actually more creative than they used to be, because we are becoming actual creators instead of managers, because most of the architects right now are basically in the managing positions and not creative positions. And I really do hope that it could change with the involvement of AI. But what about what I also wanted to ask, kind of general audience here, everyone in this room, opinion, what happens with the trends and with the clients in this case? Because I am really hoping myself that the architecture would come back to something like postmodern, fun, strange shapes, because the AI, basically what it does, it is doing a huge volumes of repetition. It is just very good at making something that already existed. So I personally do hope that it will affect the general taste of the public to dislike the copy, and to go from we are just wanting something that our neighbors have, that this Pinterest board have. I want it to change to I want something that nobody has, because the repetition is everywhere. So that actually fun, strange things that used to be only singular examples could become more wanted, could become more popular, could become the general interest of the general public, normal people. So it is my personal idea, personal wish, personal obsession, and I wanted to hear everyone's opinion on this, whether this seems to be likely or it's just what I'm envisioning in the context of AI and our future of profession.
Maybe I wanted to say that first, I want to completely support and agree with the ideas of other panelists. They're very interesting and very actual for today. And regarding your question, Maria, I wanted to say that I think now it might become a great temptation to follow this use of AI, which is creating millions tons of images, because it is fast and provides a beautiful picture in a second. But for architecture, I think it's a great point to think about its own values and why it's important to implement an architectural thinking in creating buildings, and to explain this value to the external audience, which buys architecture, which asks architects to create buildings. So it's also clear for people why architecture is important and what makes it, why it isn't simply image of the building. It's the first point. And second point, I wanted to support Mark's speech, because when AI allows to free a lot of time for so architects can no more focus simply on creating images and presentation materials or producing drawings, but can shift their focus on some more important qualities of architecture, qualities of space, and how it responds to the necessities of the society and culture and some other external contexts.
Thank you very much for your comment. Toshiki, you wanted to say?
Yeah, well, I think even the fun, strange, singular things in the history came out of vacuum. So I think creativity is not something which doesn't have any precedence, or let's say past data set. So in that way, I think AI, if we can find a way to creatively like engage with AI, then we can still create something like really fun, strange, and singular things. And I think like again, like in that sense, surrealism is like something which is really interesting. Something like, you know, the poem by Lord Trayamon, which is about you know the chance meeting of what was that, umbrella and a sewing machine on the operation table. These are all like, you know, existing nouns, words, but by combining like, you know, those words, you can create something like totally strange thing. And that you know, AI is like really good at, you know, combining, synthesizing those like totally unrelated concepts or objects and create something, you know, which is like really interesting. So I'm pretty optimistic about like, you know, about your question.
Well, I hope that it all turns to something interesting indeed. And I do agree that, like, of course, AI is not stopping people from being creative. I'm totally on the same page with you that by using AI, you can also like increase your creativity in a way. I'm just hoping that it will also kind of free the way for creativity for, I don't know, general taste of the public, so to say. Because so far, previously like what we see in the feed on Instagram, AI is creating very similar things that people are calling like AI slop or something. And I think I do feel that there is a tendency right now for people to be more creative and create something intentionally different in this context. So I'm hoping that the trend will somehow go to architecture and we will also see more strange precedents, but we'll basically see how this will happen. Keisuke, do you have something to add to this specific conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many I thought that they can come across. Basically that I agree that Marko mentioned that it's on the continuity of the history of the technology development. The AI is nothing special, but at the same time, it is hitting some and crossing some threshold that up to now that we've been developing so many technologies, but still cognition, understanding, and information processing has been limited within the one physical object, for instance, a human's brain or human body or one computer, but with the network and the AI and I basically thinking that the AI, especially LLM type of AI, if the high dimensional search engine, let's say Google and Yahoo, whatever, those are the search engine which deals with the solid unit, which is letters and text and stuff, and which never change. It's a solid statistics element. Those are the unit. But the AI is the high-dimensional search engine. Whatever question you gave, based on the context, they generate the answer out of the enormous amount of the information and custom make it to you. So high dimension never be consistent. That's the value. And then that means that your information processing is no more limited within the threshold of the one physical body. And if that's the nature, everyone can join the creative process, and you cannot anymore claim that, let's say, one building used to be Frank Gehry designed this building. Yeah, that's agreeable. But in the future, the process is dispersed, discrete, and constantly real-time generated. And it's architecture design or anything else. could be a result of such a kind of process, a repetitive process, so that the creation or the any kind of information being shared throughout the physical limitation might be fundamentally different from 20th century. So that might be, in that point of view, AI is the fundamental game changer for creation, and especially authorship, that the main topic in this conversation.
Thank you very much for your comment. It's really interesting to hear from your position. And what about, I wanted also to ask about another thing, and maybe Marko to direct this question to you, because we are right now saying that, yes, this like a huge amount of normal tasks, of simple tasks will go to the AI, and this will happen 100%. But how, like, on what timeline does it happen? Will it happen, like, has it already happened? Is it already the norm that we are currently facing? Will it happen in several years? And what happens with ethical conditions? What happens with the black box thing? How do we know that all this automated process will never like turn down on us? And how are we sure that it will all work properly forever? Can we actually surely put a huge amount of work to the hands of AI, and will it happen soon, or is it still a long way of coming? Because just the conversation that I heard today on another roundtable session, they were speaking about like norms and codes, and how in US the government system is being automated with AI, and there is still a long way to come to optimize this process, because initially there is a big part of still human to this. And okay, AI agents can optimize the project documentation, but the people who are checking this documentation are still people. And unless it goes to the process of agents speaking to agents, it's still a very hard communication. So how do you see this going on further?
I think I can share a few slides. I'll take maybe a step back to answer your question, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
Basically, I think one of the best parts of this AI hype now is that it's pushing people just to think about changes. And all of this hype about the biggest change ever, it's pushing more conservative people to do the changes. Construction market is considered as one of the most conservative ones out there, especially for talking about R&D and new tech. So basically for BuildBuild, it's a huge opportunity. And I just want to share a few slides to tell you, like, on our example, what we're doing and how it works, like why huge opportunities are opening right now. So if you look on the construction industry, here are the numbers presented by the European Union, but actually those numbers are quite common all over the world. US, different parts of Asia, Africa, non-European Union countries in Europe, etc. The biggest part of the construction turnover is held not by the enterprises, not by the small businesses, but the medium-sized businesses. So the normal businesses, normal companies. And the interesting part is that those companies, they do not have IT departments or IT directors. I think like there's no much architecture offices having an IT directors. So this put them in a position when they're not able actually themselves to connect all of the simple tools out there. So for example, myself, I use HubSpot for CRM, I use Notion for project management in the team, I use Slack for communication, I use blah, blah, blah. And all of those tools, me and my team were connecting ourselves and integrating in one big system. This is something that usually construction company cannot do, same as architectural office. And what it has produced actually as a result. Basically, we had few digitalization waves in the industry in the last 30, 40 years, starting from the ERPs in the 80s for manufacturing the cars. Toyota was the leader there, etc. But construction still stayed undigitalized. So we can see some numbers that like less than 35% of companies use any kind of system for like managing the resources and economics of the companies. And less than 6% of the companies do have any kind of dashboard to visualize their results and understand what's going on. First reason is like lack of this IT expertise to connect all of the point tools, etc. But on the other side, like legacy IT systems, like ERP systems, are too hard to implement in construction because of many reasons. But one of them is that to maintain data in the system, you need to do a lot of inputs. And in a construction project, like bill of quantities, the estimate of work, can contain like hundreds of line items. So it means that if you want to have up-to-date data, you need every day to input hundreds of line items of something new. And it's too hard job to do. And basically all of those companies, they stayed to work something like this, like a lot of Excel sheets, some PDFs, WhatsApps, Gmails, blah. Actually looks a lot like architecture practice and like re-inputting the same data between different instances. And yeah, they're using computer, they're using cloud, they're like digital, they have some numbers, blah, blah, blah. But it's all on the shoulders of people doing manual things. Basically, how we look on that is like, if you think about a child back in the 90s or 80s, and you tell them about the computers, they imagine a computer with AI, the ones that we're trying to get now, not the computers they had in 90s or even we have now. So basically, what we are seeing now that what we with the BuildBuild do, we basically through everything that you see here on the screen, like splash in a one and automate fully for the teams. We can save them like tens of hours per week of every project management team just of these data re-inputs, giving them much more insights and blah, blah, blah. And all of that is enabled by the AI. Basically, what we have here is that AI is helping us to like fully customize everything they need as a result. But on the other side, to fully automate data entry and paperwork collection and numbers collection, etc. So it's a completely not interesting work, not creative work, just re-inputting from the paper to somewhere, then from the PDF to somewhere, from the Excel to somewhere. And if you think about current state where we're right now, AI is actually opening the most conservative doors because people are every day hearing that the world is changing and they need to change. So basically for us as a BuildBuild, as a startup that is building software for these mid-sized companies, basically it's opening doors that previously were like basically impossible to get. And we can see it here by those numbers. Yeah, the market was not, no one won that market. So basically today with AI, we can do it. So a lot of ideas that both in architects or like people in IT or like anywhere else had, today with AI, the doors are opening and there are possibilities and solutions to do. And I guess there is so much of this busy work around that can be automated, removed, that it's not actually like the ethical question, should we do it? Ethical question is how fast we should do it. Because like, in my opinion, like people should do much more interesting things and much more valuable things. So maybe I'm not completely answering your question, but I think that was that's how I'm looking on it. Yeah. Today, AI is removing the status quo. We can ask questions which are previously not never answered, and things that were never working for like tens of years before can start working today. And that's exactly like, for example, what we are doing. And we're just a small startup with a small team with some creativity, yeah, but not that much resources as huge companies that can do, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think there is a huge potential for that.
Thank you very much for your answer. And oh, I think we're getting 10 more minutes. Thank you, Toyoda-san. Okay, so does everyone want to add something about the timeline of our future? Like, how fast can we get the boring processes out of our way and become architects and creators of something interesting? How fast do you think it will happen?
I probably wanted to support Marko's speech. First point, I think AI is already very usable for the research in architecture, as your example of your project, Maria, as well as, for instance, in our practice, we experiment with training AI to detect architectural objects and different pipelines of training AI. For instance, using graphs, using images, using sign distance fields, provides a lot of information about what differentiates one architectural element from another, what is window, what is opening, what is wall. So I think here AI acts as a very good research, especially for theory of architecture research tool. And I wanted to highlight another, probably a bit more speculative possibility, but as we all know, AI is trained on a great amounts of data. It knows everything what is contained in the internet, so it is trained on all digital resources of information. And one of the main characteristics of AI is its ability to detect patterns and general concepts, so its ability to abstract. So that's why probably AI also can become a great tool to understand some patterns which culture and society follows by abstracting it and by understanding general concepts. And regarding your question about timeline, I try to be short. Probably the main question is when architecture will be available, also, as Marko stated, to collect the necessary amount of data to train AI to solve specifically architectural tasks, because now it only can work with text, with images, and with code. So the greatest question is where to give data.
Yeah, that's a really, I guess the fundamental question is the data sets right now. We all kind of end up there. I also end up there. So data sets is our bottleneck right now, I would suppose.
Yeah, well, although I agree with Marko just said about those almost like all the boring tasks or bullshit tasks could be taken away by the AI in the near future. But I feel that there will be more new kinds of boring tasks emerging after the existing boring tasks were eliminated. And actually, I don't really, I mean, this might be a bit problematic, but I don't really hate doing boring tasks. Sometimes like it really kind of triggers your like creativity in a way. And what I have in mind right now is this old movie Karate Kid, where this protagonist learns how to become a karate master under this Japanese master in LA, like Mr. Miyagi. And what Mr. Miyagi first taught this protagonist is to wax his car, which has nothing to do with karate. And the protagonist got really pissed off by doing this boring tasks. But it turned out that this movement of waxing on, waxing off the car is really useful in terms of kind of protecting from the punching at the end. So I mean, there could be some really interesting serendipity, coming from boring tasks too. So I don't want to, have everything, taken away by AI, but I feel that, there should be some, hidden, humane, interesting quality even inside the boring tasks.
That's a good point to think about. No, actually, I also do like some boring tasks. Like even when you sit down to model out some environment for your project and you just do the windows and everything up to the smallest detail, it's kind of mediative in a way, and you can sort of think of other stuff while doing this. So I actually do agree with you on this point, I think. Keisuke, what do you think about the data sets? Because I think it's very close to what you've been working on in some parts. When will we have proper ones? Yeah, when will I have enough data to become an architect?
Yeah, the LLM is based on the texts, and Marko mentioned that the code is plenty of on the internet, but the forms and shapes, and especially the ones out of the physical world, is not captured and accumulated yet. So that is definitely a challenging field, and that's why the trend is going to the physical AI and the spatial AI. Yeah, our laboratory is now focusing on the AI to generate the forms from the real space and then give the geometry and also the information out of it. So that is the hot field, and I think it's going to be soon that you can just casually scan and you can get the syntax and the forms and stuff. So I think it's the matter of time. I think it's more of the forms are finally in hand of our the sandbox in a way, and then how we can approach with the AI integrated process of the generation. The AI fundamentally, I think, is the how to deal with the ambiguity. And architecture is the art of the valuable because we can handle the ambiguity and then give the specifics. But the architecture and construction industry and code related, that on and the other hand, has to be very specific and definite. We have to push to the limit to the efficiency and then the everything. So the ambiguity and the definiteness is coexisting in architecture. That's why it's difficult for AI to completely replace the architect. That's my basic standpoint. But the industrial physicality might standardize the ambiguity that information, AI generated information give us. So the combination of AI process and the certain limitation of a physical production could feed each other and may give certain tasks to replace certain way of architectural construction. That might happen, but I don't know. Still, that it might be very difficult to fill all the holes for AI. So that, yeah.
I see your point. Thank you, everyone. I think we're having 1 minute left. So unfortunately, we need to wrap up this conversation. But thank you all for joining us today. And it was a great opportunity to have all my favorite people in one virtual room. Hopefully once we can meet in real time somehow together and have a good conversation, which is not limited to 1 Zoom hour. But thank you, everyone. And it was a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts today.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure meeting you. Ms. Maria, thank you for hosting us.
No problem at all. Always a pleasure.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.